Artaud's next search towards the Theatre of Cruelty took the form of a journey, motivated in part by a continued interest in ritual and a belief in the power of theatre as a healing act.
Artaud had become preoccupied with the Tarahumara, the gestures of the Tarahumara Indians in the northern Mexico, and was able to get a government grant from the Mexican government to travel from Mexico City up into the mountains and spent several months there, taking part in rituals around the hallucinatory drug peyote. And it's really at this point in his work that he's preoccupied with the nearest that Artaud ever comes to a shamanic identity, that he's constantly watching how the rituals of the Tarahumaras operated, that he's investigating how these have a curative or a transforming function, and is allowed himself just once to take part in the peyote rituals, and feels that this could have been a pivotal moment, a seminal moment in his work, in which he was able to create this culture of this curing culture of fire and gesture that he dreamed about at this time. And in the end was disappointed because he felt that that his once only participation in the peyote ritual hadn't launched that kind of change in his work, and that in fact he was back in the world of having to struggle constantly and be involved in constant fights to even begin to realise his ideas for theatre and art.
Having once again failed to find the outcomes he hoped for, Artaud returned briefly to Paris, before setting off for the Aran Islands, this time in search of a view of what he believed would be the end of the world.
Artaud never sees time as being linear. He sees it as being something that he creates through his own performance acts, or as something which is necessarily apocalyptic and is always going to head into disintegration and disaster. And so when Artaud travelled to Ireland, to the western coast of Ireland in 1937, it was literally to give himself a good opportunity to view an apocalyptic event. And he travelled to Inishmore, which is one of the islands off the western coast of Ireland, an island which is full of ruined churches, of hill forts from 3,000 or 4,000 year old hill forts, and he travelled there to have a vast ocular perspective of the apocalypse coming on. And so again, it's actually what happens when the apocalypse doesn't happen, in a parallel way to that in which what happened when Artaud's ideas for theatre in the mid-1930s in Paris didn't happen, failed, and he was reviled by the theatre community in Paris at that time. How do you improvise a way beyond the apocalyptic moment, beyond the moment of disaster? And perhaps it's Artaud's explorations of how you work with a terminal situation, a situation in which everything has already collapsed around you, that is perhaps some of the most interesting aspect of his work, to actually work with an apocalyptic or a terminal material.
When the apocalypse failed to materialise, Artaud returned to Dublin. But destitute, he was deported by the authorities. On his return to France, he was sent to an asylum, a situation that dominated the remainder of his days.